Good morning, good morning, good morning. It is 5:30 in the morning. That means it is time for coffee and sketching. Sketching and coffee. I'm not sure which is more important, the coffee or the sketching. Today we have a Uintatherium fossil. Uintatherium is one of the megafauna mammals that cropped up right after the extinction of the dinosaurs. And quickly vanished after. Safari has a whole set of toys dedicated to these mammals, dedicated to the mammals that nobody's ever heard of before, like Uintatherium. Down in the Uinta mountain region of the Rockies, which is what it's named for. And it is a very weird looking thing. I don't know if you've seen it yet, if you can see it on the screen yet, but it is a very weird looking thing. When they first found it, they argued about whether it was an elephant, whether it was an elk. They could not decide what to do with it because it is very bumpy and bony. My question is, the question that sent me down the rabbit hole last night is, how many of them did they actually find? Is it really a thing, or did they only find one, and because of our race to win the paleontology accolades, did they race to identify it, classify it, so they could get published? And so I asked the internet how many individuals there were that they had discovered, and the internet said many. Typically you get a little bit more exact answer. Like, I mean, how many actual fossils of this thing have they found? I mean, it's quantifiable, right? It ought to be something that they can just say, oh yeah, we have 200 specimens. We know this thing exists because there's 200 of these things that are exactly alike, or close enough to being exactly alike that they can be classified together. I'm not trying to say it didn't exist. I'm just saying you'd think they'd be a little more, you'd think they'd be just a little more forthcoming with their with their information if they're trying to convince you that these things not only existed but were quite popular, especially around Wyoming, Montana, China. There's another type of them that was quite popular in China. They're one of the few herbivores that are saber-toothed, like a walrus or a wild boar. I mean, it's just weird. Anyway, we're going to draw it today. Without ducking around to see what all these little structures are underneath here. I'm having to guess on some of them based on my knowledge of anatomy. Like, I know that's a jawbone coming up behind an eye socket, but this eye socket is still full of rock. They haven't dug it out. But this thing was initially discovered during the bone wars between Othniel Nash and Edward Cope, and later a fellow named Leedy also got involved. And that's what I was talking about earlier when I said, how many of them did they find? Or is it just something that they were racing to name so that they could get credit for it? And those two guys, Cope and Marsh, Othniel Marsh, Edward Cope, those two guys squandered their family fortunes hunting fossils, chasing down fossils. Doing things like paying people to bring them fossils but they were doing things like when they would pay them, they would say, okay, I'll give you $10 for every fossil you bring me. And so people would bind fossils and then break them into pieces. Because if you find one fossil, that's $10. But if you find 10 fossils, that's $100. So if you break it into 10 pieces, there's your $100. What could possibly go wrong? So then, instead of just ending up with solid skeletons and things that would give them all the information they needed up front, they had to piece it together from all of the fragmented fossils that they were given. And it reminds me of the story of the three blind philosophers that discover an elephant. I'm telling very Tolkien-esque stories today. But the three blind philosophers that discovered an elephant, one walks up, puts his hand out, finds the trunk of the elephant, runs his hand all up and down it, and declares that an elephant is like a snake, like a giant anaconda. And the second philosopher comes up and puts his hands on the elephant's massive body and says, no, no, an elephant's like a giant brick wall. And the third philosopher comes up, puts his hands on the elephant's tail and says, no, elephants are like vines. And all three of them were right and all three of them were wrong. So that's what would happen during the bone wars. Is they would all get a piece of something and say, oh, this is obviously this. Oh, this is obviously that. Well, all of them were completely wrong. Happened in China too. They discovered fossils in China, and the Chinese government were paying the peasants to bring fossils, and they were doing the same thing, and they were doing the same thing in China. Anyway, that's the kind of nerdy stuff that. Hey, Claudia. That's the kind of nerdy stuff where my mind went all day yesterday, was chasing this down, trying to figure out, how accurate is it? How many samples? How many samples of it do they actually have? How accurate are their samples? How complete are the samples? And the internet just was not very forthcoming with information. How many individuals did they find? Many. The answer was many. These little bones, these little horns on his skull, he had 6 of them. 2 at the snout, 2 at the back of the snout, and 2 above the eyes. And first they drew them like triceratops. Big long horns like triceratops. They even put these in a classification of mammal called Dinosaurids. Which again, you know, how accurate is that? Because once you break down the name, they're obviously naming them after dinosaurs. They're not naming them after anything that makes sense. Dino means thunder. Cera means horn. Triceratops, for instance, means 3-horned face. So a dinosaurid means thunderhorn. How is that a thing? I got an extra light shining on my sample. It's giving me a shadow that I shouldn't have. And the real sad thing is there are thousands and thousands and thousands of pieces of fossils stuck in the basement of museums waiting to be put together because it takes so much time and money to do it, to pay somebody to do it, and the museum has so many other expenses that they are loath to dedicate the money to a whole team just to do that, right? But every year they make new discoveries, like this thing was a member of the what's it called, a perissodactyl? I'm not sure of the pronunciation of that, but it's an ungulate. They found enough remains to know that it's an ungulate. They found enough remains to know that it had an odd number of toes, which puts it in the same classification as horses and rhinoceroses and tapirs. What was this? That shouldn't be that big, should it? I got confused by the excess lines. That never happens, right? What's supposed to happen there? There's a bone there, there's a bone there. Yeah. This is supposed to be just a little further back. And then it has its own contact shadow underneath it. Because that's where it's touching the ground. But because they're all locked up in the basements, we are stuck with the information that they gave us in the 1850s, 1860s, 1890s. And it's not necessarily accurate. But there's nobody to dispute it. Pen and aquarelle, ink and wash, Mom. She's voting. She's still voting for ink and wash. Aquarelle is watercolor. I'm with you. I think that's a pretty good. She's voting for next month because we're about to finish this this sketchbook, and so she's voting for ink and wash for next month. No, it's alright, Cletty. I knew what you meant. Because that's the name of my watercolors, aquarelle. I knew what you meant. And I think my mom's on your side. We can do that. We just have to remember I have to be at work in the morning. I do. I like that she says she's saying in the chat that it's just a splash of just a little splash of wash. And I like that too, where it's mostly an ink drawing, but you have a little splash of yellow or purple or green to accent it. Go back in and add some form to this. But like most children, when I was younger, I was fascinated with paleontology. And so, learning about the bone wars between Othniel Marsh and Edward Cope and Lady, and I spent hours with my dinosaur books going over the arguments of what was what. And then the more modern ones, Jack Horner, Robert Bacher, and I can't tell you how excited I was. And then I know this sounds weird, but I was actually very excited when I saw that they mentioned Robert Bacher. Robert Bacher was a consultant on Jurassic Park. And they mentioned his name in the story, and I knew who he was. I'd read his books. And the book that Timmy was carrying in the movie, I had that book. And I was like, yes, these are nerds like me. And so yesterday, at some point, I mentioned to my son, he asked me what I was supposed to be drawing today. And I mentioned that I thought, because I could kind of see, I told him I thought it was a Triceratops. And then he comes to me last night all excited. No, Dad, it's not a Triceratops. It's Uintatherium. And he starts telling me all about it, and I'm just sitting there smiling. I'm like, yes, son, yes. You go down that rabbit hole, kiddo. Proud daddy moments. When your kids are exactly the same kind of nerd you were. How are we doing on time? Oh, it's 5:59. My parents used to get me these wooden dinosaur skeletons that there were puzzles you put together. And I would put them together. And on more than one occasion, I added modeling clay to them to give them skin and muscles. So to see my kids be the same kind of nerd, science nerds as me is quite exciting. I've got two that wanted to be marine biologists, one that wanted to be a photojournalist, and the one I really thought was going to go into engineering, and he may still, he's only 34, but I really thought he was going to go into engineering. His love of all things mechanical. He just hates school. Loves to learn, but hates school. And I get that. But yeah, all four of my kids are kind of nerds. And that makes me happy. We got to wrap this up though. I got to go. Yeah, it's after 6. I got to go. So I'm going to shade this whole thing in because none of it is white. Right, and I'm going to go through and I'm going to clean up the extra lines. That wouldn't be there if I'd have just taken just a little more time with that last shading. Attempt. Bring out some of these highlights again. We have highlights across here. We have a highlight here and here and here and here. Right there. Right there, right there. That's probably good enough. Okay, I'm calling it. What is today? Today's the 8th. Of May. I need it from the same perspective that I had it. There we go. Oh, that's horrible. Let's try that again. All right. It's still not very clear, is it? Anyway, there we go, guys. Thank you so much for joining me. You know I look forward to it every morning. This is therapy for me, actually, when I get to come down here and I get to do this, because it really winds me up for the day. Kind of gets my juices flowing. and gets me excited about starting my day. So be sure and tune in tomorrow, same Artistic Biker time, same Artistic Biker channel, and then we dance. We dance until somebody says they see me dancing, because that's how I know that the lag has caught up, and when I stop the stream, it will be where I'm finished. Peace out, everybody.